Good afternoon, and welcome to the Energy Prospectus Group webinar hosted by Mundoro Capital. This event is being recorded. During the presentation, all participants will be muted. If you have any questions you would like to ask, please type them into the chat feature. We will read and answer questions at the end of the presentation. Thank you so much for joining us today. Now here's Dan Stephens, who will introduce today's speaker.
All right. Well, thanks to everybody that's joining us live today. We still got some people coming on here, so wait a minute. But anyway, so welcome again. Today's webinar is being hosted by Mundoro Capital, a public company based in Canada focused on mineral acquisition, exploration, development, and investment in copper and gold. Their portfolio includes mineral properties primarily concentrated in Eastern Europe and the Southwest United States. I believe this microcap has a lot of upside for us. It generates revenues by managing exploration programs that are funded by large mining companies like BHP, one of the largest in the world. Current focus is on copper and gold, both of which are making new highs in 2024. Mundoro's 2023 financial results in Canadian dollars were 1.2 million net income last year and 1.0 million operating cash flow. It has a big cash balance. On December 31, 2023, they had 6.5 million Canadian on the balance sheet in cash, so no need to sell more equity. And the company has 4 active exploration programs underway right now that should generate over $1 million of operating cash flow in 2024, we hope. And in addition to exploration programs being funded by large cap partners, Mundoro earns royalties in successful mining projects. So the bottom line is I finally found a microcap mining company that is profitable, generating strong operating cash flow, and has a business plan that has a lot of upside by earning equity in large mines that will be operated by some of the very large mining companies. So today our speaker is Teo Dekhiv. Mundoro's president and CEO will be making today's presentation. Teo has a diverse experience in the mineral sector, which is uniquely positioned to bring value to Mundoro Capital. He brings both a technical understanding of the key issues in the mining sector through a solid foundation of a geological and mineral engineering degree, as well as the practical understanding of the challenges facing exploration and development companies through extensive capital markets experience and hands-on management experience. Her capital markets experience has developed through management positions held at investment banks in Canada. In the capital markets, her career has covered institutional equity research, corporate finance, and merger and acquisition, primarily focused on the resource sector, but also covering technology, financial institutions, and diversified product sector. Prior to joining Mundoro, she was the vice president of corporate finance at a Toronto investment bank, advising resource companies for financing, IPOs, and mergers and acquisitions. So just a reminder, during the webinar, if you have a question, please type them into the chat box and we will answer them after the presentation. With that, I will turn it over to Teo for an update on Mundoro Capital's success in 2023 and their business strategy for 2024. So take it away, Teo.
Great. Well, thank you, Dan, for that great introduction. I have a slide deck of about 30 slides. Now, I'm going to go through some of them very quickly and through some of them very slowly. But if there are questions, please send them in the chat. And that's something that I can try and address either in the presentation or afterwards. So Mundoro is really focused on copper porphyries, and that's something that has been our North Star since pretty much 2015. And I'll kind of run through the history of why that is and what we're doing with that going forward. There are going to be a lot of forward-looking statements, so everyone, please familiarize yourself with the disclaimer, and that's on our presentation and on our website. So what is it that we do? I'm just going to start with a general high overview of the sector. So as we all know, in the mineral sector, there are the explorers, the developers, and there are the producers. Within the exploration sector, there is a subgroup called generators. And these are the companies that really kind of generate new ideas, pick up new ground, and then do partnerships, ideally with the producers, in order to advance those projects. And by doing so, they generate and create new royalties, and which is why in our sector, a lot of times you will hear about the royalty generators. So that's what this group is, and that's what Mundoro is. So we're a royalty generator. So what does that mean? First of all, it creates an environment of low risk, which is kind of unique in the exploration sector. How many of us have invested in exploration companies where, you know, it's a lot of risk because they raise capital, use that capital in order to drill test, and may sometimes not be successful. And as a result, we'll have to go back out into the marketplace and raise more capital, which causes dilution. So what we do as a business is really try and avoid that cycle. And it definitely works well in some scenarios, but not so well in others. By trying to avoid that cycle, what you create is an opportunity for a shareholder to participate and gain from all the upside, but really mitigate that downside risk of dilution. So what we do is we find areas that we think are interesting. We stake those areas directly from the government. So it's a staking process in the United States, and it's an application process in Eastern Europe. Then we bring on board partners. And our partners over the years have been, for example, BHP, JOGMEC, which is the Japanese government, Vale, which is third largest gold mining company. Or, sorry, not gold mining, not precious metals, but base metals in general, and iron ore. Kinross, gold mining company. Freeport, copper-focused producer, and First Quantum, again, copper-focused producer. So really, I think relevant producers that are in the space for copper. What we do once we bring them on board is they fund the project 100%. So it's their capital going in for drilling, geophysics, any other data collection, and then fundamentally, you know, making sure that we advance and test all the targets on that piece of ground. By doing that, we create revenue. And how do we do that exactly? It's basically through structured agreements. So we collect operator fees because we also operate the projects for our partners. We also collect what we call property payments. So every year there are payments coming to the company, irrespective of the operator fees, property payments coming every year into the company for each project that we have ventured out to our partners. And then, of course, there are additional mechanisms such as milestone payments. So as an asset advances and it succeeds going forward through milestones, such as generating a resource, doing a pre-feasibility, doing an economic assessment, those are all considered milestone payments. And most importantly, we secure and we create a new royalty around that project so that if an asset advances to commercial production, then there is a producing commercial royalty. So the way to think about these structures, and the way I like to coin them, is that they're an exploration royalty. They do pay us starting from time zero. We're not waiting 20 years for an asset to be developed. And so by paying us from time zero, we have essentially created that royalty structure. I think it's an important point about the strong balance sheet. Because we do not spend our own capital on our projects. We do for the generative phase, but certainly not for the exploration phase. That allows us to have very good cash and allows us to have that sustainable business model where we are generating enough from the portfolio in order to not have to go out into the marketplace and raise more capital. So, and I'll come back to that point a little bit later. So optionality, I think, is critical in exploration. I mean, that's a lot of times why you invest in junior equities. So we provide exposure to the copper market, a very focused exposure. We provide exposure to 2 jurisdictions. One is in Eastern Europe in the Tethyan Belt, and the other is in the Laramide Belt in Arizona, which is in the Southwest US. And we do this with a dedicated team of geologists and data scientists in order to advance these programs and these opportunities. So the process is Mundoro generates the opportunity with our team, we partner it out, and then we collect payments. And that cycle continues throughout. And basically what we do with that particular cycle is that we create a value opportunity. So the value that we create from each of the programs continues to build on itself. And I'll kind of come back to that as we kind of go through the business model in a bit more detail. So this year we have 4 active exploration programs. Last year we had 10 active exploration programs, which is why we generated just over 3 million in revenue. And we have now generated just over 1 million in free cash flow. So cash flow that actually came back into the treasury and increased the treasury from about 3 million to 4 million last year. And that's just Mundoro capital, not including our partners' cash. So what's important for 2024? Catalysts. So what does everybody love about exploration companies that have a lot of money going in the ground is drilling. Remember that all of the drilling that is going to be done in the company is paid by partners. So it's not shareholder capital at risk. Those drill results are obviously going to come out this year. And we're going to have a number of new project announcements and new partner announcements, which I'll kind of focus in on a little bit more as we get into the presentation. So where in the world are we? I love this slide. It very clearly shows we are in Eastern Europe, which is the kind of western portion of the Tethyan Belt. I'm not sure if everyone can see my mouse while I'm circling over it, but basically here in the center of the page. And then on the far left side of the slide is the Laramide Belt in Arizona. So what do those projects look like? We have a pipeline of projects. And what that basically means is that not every project is at the same stage. They're at different stages. And so some are more advanced and some are earlier stage. And by doing that and progressing them forward, obviously it creates new opportunities at the back end and more advanced opportunities at the front end. So currently, we have 3 programs with BHP. One is in target delineation, which means that it has already had an initial phase of drilling. That's been successful, and now we're following it up with additional drilling. We have another project that's called in target testing, where we have some initial drilling and we are testing further targets. And that's a really exciting project, which I'll come back to in central Serbia. And then we have a package called Target Generation, where it's a brand new package that we've put together over the last year and a half, and we've just optioned it out to BHP. And we are in the process of collecting data over that piece of ground, which we call South Timok. That's in Eastern Serbia and Eastern Europe. And that's coming together and building out those targets once that data comes in. What we also have is now 3 projects in the United States, in Arizona. Dos Cabezos is one that we've just released drill results for just a couple of weeks ago. Really exciting project. A Laramide intrusive with classic geochemical signature for porphyry systems and classic alteration signatures for porphyries that had never been drill tested. And if you think about that, in Arizona, where there's been 100 years of mining, to have a Laramide intrusive sticking out of the ground with veining that's never had a hole in it is very, very unique. So we're really excited about that project. That's been funded for the last 3 years by Vale, but unfortunately they had to pull out earlier this year, and that was just finalized in April. So now we are in the process of signing CAs and discussing this with other third parties and doing site visits. So that's why I suggested that, we're hopeful that we're going to get a new partner in this program to continue drill testing here. It's a very exciting project, and I can go into that in a bit more detail later. The next 2 that are in Arizona are Picacho and Copperopolis. Again, both were funded by Vale. Vale had to really kind of step away from their exploration globally. So it's not just Mundoro, but a lot of programs they had to drop. And obviously that company is refocusing internally. But that's created a tremendous opportunity for us because these programs have very interesting targets. They were 100% funded and brought up to their current stage by a third party. And we believe we can get new partners in those programs this year or going forward into 2025. And then another really interesting project that I think is just fascinating in how you can find more opportunities in well-proven districts is the Iskar project in Bulgaria, which we have in joint venture with the Japanese government. They've been a partner with us since about 2016, originally in Serbia, and then expanded with us into Bulgaria. We started with an alliance with them, a generative alliance, and this project area really kind of lit up through that basically 1 year, 18-month review. And it's a historical mining district in the northwestern part of the country that had been completely forgotten. And it's demonstrated that it has a sediment-hosted copper system that was previously mined with very good grades and now was dormant. We picked it up directly from the government and have been exploring and building the data set and now are in a position where we've applied for drilling permits and hope to be drilling that project area this summer. So in terms of, let me just advance my slides. Here we go. So these are the 10 programs. And like I mentioned, 4 are in active partnership. You can see a pretty large and extensive team that runs these programs. In the active height of a field season, we have up to 65 people out in the field running the program. So it is definitely no small endeavor. And it's certainly, we get through a lot of data collection throughout any calendar year. So last year, for example, we spent $13 million through our partners. Our partners funded 100% of that, of exploration dollars. So, and if you think about the exploration market and how difficult it has been to raise capital, just recognize that $13 million was spent last year by partners on these programs. So as a shareholder, you're really benefiting from that third-party capital. And if there's a discovery, you get all that upside in a very tight share structure without that constant dilution. So in terms of the programs for 2024, this is what to expect. What you can see here is the color coding is the stage of development of the project, and then basically a description of what we're doing. And basically, to summarize, there's a lot going on this year, and definitely stay tuned for those drill results. So let's just talk a little bit about our track record, because I think that's definitely important. You know, what we try and show is that there is consistency in this business model. So you don't really have to worry that you're investing and then all of a sudden there's a switch in the strategy of the company. We have consistently been running the company with this strategy. And you can see that since 2016, we generally spend about 1.1 million on G&A. And we try very hard to achieve that year over year. And what you can also see is that the fees have been growing significantly from that portfolio. Our cash position has also grown over that time frame. And again, the concept is a sustainable business model of trying very, very hard not to go out and dilute shareholders. And then also what's important to see, and that's kind of come in tandem with the fees earned, is the exploration expenditures in the company have grown significantly. And these are exploration expenditures by third parties. So how does that fit in the context of the marketplace? That's, you know, you're probably thinking that sounds all really great, but what does that mean in terms of the spectrum of the sector? And like I mentioned a little bit earlier, within the exploration space, there is a subsector called the generators. And so what I've done, because I used to be in equity research and I love comp models, they take a long time to build, but they are incredibly valuable to give you a great snapshot of what the sector is doing. So what you see here in terms of information is there's a number of companies that are the generators on the right-hand side of the chart, and on the left-hand side are the royalty companies. And what traditionally happens in this space is that as a generator matures over time with their business model, meaning they have a discovery and one of their assets start having a commercial, what we call producing royalty, then they start transitioning over to the left of the slide and become a more traditional royalty company. Now, those stocks tend to be more dividend driven in terms of their investment style. You don't really buy a royalty company for their optionality on an exploration because it just has almost no material impact on their market capitalization. But when you invest with a generator like Mundoro, on the right-hand side of the slide, what you see is that there's a lot of optionality in these stocks. And so basically what we've put together for you is, here's what the revenue picture looks like. And to have a portfolio, you got to generate a minimum of $100,000 from your portfolio. If you do that, then you're probably not a generator and you're probably an exploration company. So out of that universe, these are all the companies that generate that. The juniors are up to 1 million in revenue. The mid-tiers are between 1 and 10. And anyone generating more than 10 million of revenue consistently over a 3-year period from their portfolio becomes a senior. So you can see that Mundoro's transition has been really nice over the last 3 years. And what you see is 2021, 2022, and 2023, we generated 3 million of revenue from the portfolio. And of that 3 million, 1 million was free cash flow. So that's, I mean, that's pretty that's pretty great results. I know it's I'm the CEO of the company, but fundamentally, when you look at comp models, that doesn't get achieved very often. So I think we've been very, very dedicated and focused on disciplined approach to the model and still keeping that optionality for the marketplace. So that slide is available on our slide deck. So make sure that you take a look at it and spend some time, and feel free to call out to us and ask any questions. We're more than happy to answer questions on that. So what does that capital structure look like? So first of all, as of Q4 2023, it was 6.5 million. Just remember, of that, about 4 million is Mundoro, and the rest is partners depositing funds with us as we operate. And that number, goes up and down throughout the quarters, depending on how much cash is deposited with the company for the exploration programs. We have about 104 million shares outstanding. There's 8 million options outstanding, which is 112 million fully diluted. The company went public in November of 2003. So we've been public for almost 21 years. We have never done a rollback. So you can see that, again, it's that really disciplined approach to running the business. We have just over 50% of institutional shareholders. I think this is key. I think this is really important to keep in mind, because what it tells you, in a lot of junior equities, you see a lot of retail support, but we've built this model in such a kind of focused way that institutions have bought in and are very supportive of the strategy to focus on copper porphyries, focus on these jurisdictions, and focus on these style of large producing companies as the partners. When you look at our performance over the last 10 years, or since 2015, which is almost 10 years, you can see that what it causes is a very kind of stable share price. And then what you really want is a breakout on a discovery. So I'm actually going to skip forward. There's a really good case study, and I'm actually going to go to that before I come back to the team. So this is a case study of what that generator model can achieve. And I think this is really critical to understand both scenarios. The top scenario is was actually another generator that was right next door to us in Serbia. They had a partnership with Freeport. There was a discovery in September of 2012 was the initial drill hole that was announced, and off to the races they went. They went from approximately 17 million market cap, which is, not very different from where Mundoro is currently trading. And from that discovery, essentially were taken out by Nevson in May of 2016. So within 4 years at 524 million, so $500 million. And then Nevson was taken out by Zijing for $1.2 billion, all based on the one underlying asset discovery. Now, we have 10 projects, so you have 10 times that opportunity of creating that kind of return. So that's what we call the takeout kind of case study. The other case study is that long-term transition from a generator into a royalty company, which is, and we've put Altius here as an example. They also started out as a generator many, many years ago. The chart starts in 98. They hovered around that 20 million market cap for many years. And then they had a breakout on a great discovery, which ended up paying really good cash flow into the company. Now, obviously, it also happened right during the financial crisis. So they lost quite a lot of value during that process. But they regained all that value and have built on it and created a very successful royalty company as a result, and have obviously gone up, 6,700%. So both scenarios are very, I think, important to understand in terms of this model. So the team's been together for many, many years. And actually, I think our chairman who just retired recently off the board, John Hoey, is also on this call, but he's been a tremendous support in the company and still one of the founding shareholders. In terms of our board, is Stephen Altman, Nick Hatch, and Michael Kalniak. And then three really important technical advisors that we worked with for many, many years. Richard Moores and I go way back, probably to my equity research days, when he was running a company out on the Tethyan Belt that I ended up financing when I was in investment banking. And then David Burrows joined us recently. He used to be the chief geologist for Vale, retired, and then joined us and continues to provide technical advice on these programs. And then Richard Silito, who's what we call the grandfather of porphyries in the industry and has been a tremendous technical advisor for us for the last 10 years as we've built out this portfolio. So I think that's kind of really interesting to see. In terms of, really, we've talked about that unique business model, but if people have questions later about, what the differences are between a royalty company and a generator, I'm happy to answer that. Just remember that royalty companies tend to use their balance sheet to buy assets, whereas generators use their own, what we call human capital, to create those opportunities. Okay, so where in the world are we? So this is the Western Tethyan Belt. It's a really interesting part of the world. It's in Eastern Europe. And what you see here is the Timok region, just up here. And then what you also see is, this is part of the Bulgarian portion of the Upper Cretaceous portion of the belt. So this portion of the belt tends to have copper porphyries, more so than gold-focused porphyries, meaning that there tends to be a higher copper component than a gold component. Whereas when you get into the tertiary portion of the belt, the porphyries tend to get a little bit more gold-rich, which is what you see down in Greece, and certainly what you see kind of as you go out into Turkey. So we focus on the Upper Cretaceous portion because we're more focused on copper. We've got a very good land position in the Timok region. That's where there's been 100 years of mining, primarily through what the industry knows as the Bore mines. There are 4 very important deposits that are now mines. The Bore mine, Veliki Kriveli, Majdanpek, and Sarovo are the 4 traditional ones. And then the recent discovery that I pointed out is Chukatopeki, which is now also owned by Zijin. Now, these mines privatized and Zijin acquired them in 2019. So that's obviously now all controlled under one company. But our land package, probably everything combined, is about 850 square kilometers. That's pretty significant to basically explore one mining district and really kind of dominate that land package. And then as you move toward the southeast, I mentioned to you the Iskar project, which is our joint venture with JOGMEC, the Japanese government. So that's this pink colored license. And then you move down to the southeast, we do have 2 additional license areas that we've applied for and that we've previously explored in, and we think are still part of that important pipeline of creating more opportunities. So that's where we are in Eastern Europe. And then I'm going to skip forward to where we are in the United States. So this is the Laramide Belt in the Southwest US. Just for context for people, we've got Tucson here. In this particular area, what you basically see, and you can kind of see the legend here, the red triangles are the current active copper mines. Past producers are the orange triangles. And certainly going forward, there are future pending copper mines that are in that permitting phase. And what you can see is that there's clearly a lot of historical and current and future production that's going on in Arizona. When you look at Arizona globally, based on its historical production and its current reserves, it is the second most important copper domain on the planet. So that should kind of really highlight for you how important copper production is in the state of Arizona, and just how much of an impact the United States has on copper production. We think this region still has a tremendous amount of opportunity for more discoveries. We got involved here in 2020. The reason for that was there were so many companies that were focused on, historical resources, but they weren't really evaluating what's next. Is there hidden opportunities, undercover style opportunities in Arizona? And like I mentioned, the first area that we ended up finding is Dos Cabezas down here in the southeast in Cochise County. Laramide intrusive, directly mapped on surface with good geochemistry and alteration and veining. That is a very, very rare opportunity. So obviously immediately we picked up that area and have been advancing it previously with Vale, and now anticipate being able to partner that out with another third party. We've gotten very good interest on that from various groups. Picacho is just northwest of Tucson, another area that we believe has a lot of pediment cover over it. And so the historically known resource that was there continues undercover, and new localities for more copper resources. So that's an exciting project area. And the most recent addition to our portfolio is Copperopolis, which we think is a fantastic opportunity for, again, a region that is clearly known for copper production, but yet has these large systems that people probably haven't really looked at since the 1960s. And if you think about it, the 1960s, at that point in time, we didn't really understand copper porphyries the way that we do now. And that's basically, almost 40 years, 60 years later. And so having that new understanding and having new techniques, we can go back into kind of these historical camps and really shake the tree. And like Copperopolis, we found 5 kilometers of pervasive alteration of mineralization that was open ground. So we're really excited about the potential of a copper porphyry system there as well. So in terms of the project areas, and my slide is, here we go. This is a zoom in to the Timok region. So that's what we talked about in Eastern Serbia. So this is a Google Earth image, and you can see it in much more detail in terms of the license areas and all the various targets that we have in this area. The ground in the center, which is the Mundoro licenses. So again, that was previously funded with Vale up to the end of April, just last month. And now we are in the process of signing new CAs and doing site visits with third parties. And again, we feel very confident that there will be a new partner in these programs. Lots of targeting in this project area, right in the heart of the Timok district, and a really rare opportunity for a third party to get involved now in 2024. The next area is in Eastern Europe, and again in Bulgaria, and this is just to highlight, this is the Iskar project here. So it's a rather mountainous terrain, not mountains compared to British Columbia, but definitely mountainous in the local terrain. And so that particular area, like I mentioned, we're doing drill permitting now, and we'll be drill testing ideally this summer, late summer. And then a really interesting area here, this is the Panagorishte district, a sprinkling of copper porphyry mines that have been in production, and some of them still are, and then a land package that we've applied for and are working through with the government in order to be able to explore there in the future. So just kind of stepping back to that opportunity where we have ground available in central Timok. Basically what you can see here is it's a very extensive package. It's about 450 square kilometers. We have a lot of geophysics, geochemistry, alteration, structural analysis, and we've got drilling that's already been started and needs to continue. So this is an area that we feel is really a great opportunity for any partner that wants to be in a proven mining camp with 100-year-old porphyries being mined. So that is, keep your eyes out and your ears out for an announcement on these programs in 2024 from the company. And maybe Dan, I have a series of slides on each of the individual projects, but I think what I'm going to just focus in on is one more example and then just kind of open it up to Q&A so people can ask questions. But the other area that I think is really important that I brought up a little bit earlier is this here in Southeast Arizona in Cochise County, which is the Dos Cabezos project. So here we've got 5 target areas. We drill tested it right before Christmas last year. Really exciting project area. And then specifically with Mescal Canyon, basically what we discovered, again, brand new hole, never been tested before, intersected mineralization, 100 meters of 1,444 ppm copper, which is indicative of the fact that we are clipping the edge of a system. We also see really great alteration here that clearly indicates that we are, again, in that outward periphery of a potential porphyry. And then just going to the north of that at Mineral Park, again, mineralization throughout the hole, clearly indicative of a porphyry style system. Again, we think we're in the outskirts of that. And so really the next phase is bring in the partner and continue with the drilling in this program. And that's, I think, again, keep your eyes out for that because that's a very exciting project. One thing to mention in terms of the company, we do take CSR very seriously. We try and build relationships in all the communities where we work. We think, we're obviously the first people that any community meets, regardless of partners. And so we try and create a very open relationship. We explain everything that we're doing on the ground. And then oftentimes, to the best that we can, we will hire as much labor as we can from a local community to complete those programs. So we've got environmental, social, and governance processes in place for all of our programs and the company overall. And our approach to investment in any area where we operate is really to focus in on kind of cultural heritage, education, both from primary right up to secondary and university level, and healthcare. When we invest in these 3 segments, we feel that we are genuinely contributing to the growth of those communities where we work. So that's something, again, I'm happy to answer more questions about. So with that, I will leave it there.
Okay, let me ask one dumb question, and then I'll ask several more dumb questions. What is a porphyry? What does that mean?
Okay, a porphyry. It's, what? That's a fantastic question. Not dumb at all.
Okay.
So let's just talk about the copper market.
Okay.
When you look at global copper production, so it's about 22, 25 million tons per year. Of that, about 65%, maybe even 70%, come from these things called copper porphyries. So these are large, intrusive complexes, usually in a volcanic range, that come up. Ideally, you want them to come up right to the surface. You know exactly where they are, and you can mine them from surface. But oftentimes they're undercover. But they come up, and basically what we do as an industry is we mine those porphyries. Now, because they're such large systems, that's where we can create those opportunities, which we hear about in the industry called multi-generational mines. You want a mine to start and maybe conclude 100 years later, multi-generational. So copper porphyries are really the style of deposition that can create that multi-generational operation. Whereas if you go after a small structure, a small vein, which is traditionally kind of more what we see in the gold space, although there are some gold porphyries. I mean, there's a number of them, but they tend to be a little bit smaller scale. When you go after vein structures, those are smaller mines. And I think one really important point for, I think all of us in the industry to keep in mind is that the bigger the mine is, the more engineering there is. And the more engineering there is, the safer it is. And so the less impact it has in terms of environmental footprint. So I think as an industry, if you think about copper exploration, development, production, you really want to be focusing on copper. So if you're going to be in the porphyry business, you got to be in the if you're going to be in the copper business, you got to be in the porphyry business. And if you're going to be in the porphyry business, recognizing how big these systems are, you're going to have really deep pockets in order to explore them. So
yeah. So how do they mine this? When you find one of these things, you can just, ramp down into it, or are these big open hole mines, or what are they?
yeah, no, well, they can be. So definitely. So if it comes right to surface, you're creating an open pit, right? And so you're starting small and you're kind of winding through. And I think everyone has seen those image of large open pits. Like, so for example, in Chile, some of those really large copper porphyry mines, and sometimes there's a whole cluster of them that have occurred. Porphyries tend to happen in clusters as well. So kind of like, you think of my hand, each one of my fingers might be one of the intrusion porphyries, and they'll kind of along a 10-kilometer strike length kind of come up to surface and be mined over time. That can definitely happen. So what you do is, it's an open pit, and you start at the top and you kind of work your way down. And some of those mines now are, 500 meters depth open pits.
Oh, yeah.
Another example is that you find it underground and it's preserved. So it's preserved below a layer of like volcanics or sedimentary cover, which, it could be different types of sediments, but it's preserved. And so in that scenario, you want very competent outside rock that you can basically build a shaft, go down to where the porphyry is. And what we need to do in order to economically mine a porphyry underground is what we call bulk tonnage. So bulk tonnage is really important in order to build out scale and have economies of scale in terms of economics around a project. And then what we talk about now in the industry is these block caves. Block caves are very, very difficult. It's definitely not small company business. I think there's probably only 4 companies on the planet that have done it successfully. So those are very, very engineering intensive operations. Large porphyry underground or large porphyry at surface.
Okay. Well, interesting. No doubt about it. I think you've answered the questions that I had to begin with that were emailed to me. Do you expect to be cash flow positive at 2024? And I think you're saying yes on that. What are your major milestones deliverable this year? Would be when you get like other mining companies, those things that you say on that circle chart that are available. So people come in and look at those, you have a presentation on those, and then they decide if they want to fund the further work, like the drill program and all that, right?
Yeah, so we have these projects available. Companies sign CAs. They look through the data rooms. They do their due diligence. They do site visits. And then depending on their interest, it progresses to negotiations or joint ventures or option agreements, which doesn't matter what industry you're in. I mean, you could be selling shoes or you could be selling, copper porphyries. It's kind of the same process. So it's a very traditional approach of how to get into an asset.
Yeah. When I worked at Hess, outside prospect generators were coming to us all the time with deals.
Yeah.
And actually, some of the best ones we ever got into were like a tiny shop, a small shop that put together a really good prospect and secured it. Now, to develop one to get to where you can build the data room and everything. And do you tie up the leasing rights and everything? You've like leased it up. You've really secured the assets.
So we own the properties 100%. Yes.
So what you own is like in oil and gas, it'd be the mineral interest, right? You've leased them or whatever. Okay.
Yeah. So in the United States, they're called mineral exploration permits if you lease from the state. And then if they're leases from, and what they're called is mining claims, if they're federal land, so from the BLM. So the BLM has mining claims and the state lands are mineral exploration permits. Slightly different systems, but fundamentally you as a company are responsible for managing the tenure over whatever type of ground it is. And some of it could be private arrangements with private landowners, right? So you kind of build out your package based on the ownership structure of where you want to be.
Okay. But in the United States, people can own the mineral rights, right?
They can, yeah. And there's
just like in oil and gas, right?
Yeah, there's these old type of claims called patented mining claims. Those are extremely valuable. Sometimes you can have private landowners that actually don't own their mineral rights. A lot of them don't actually even know that.
They sold them they sold them a long time ago and they don't even know it, right?
Yeah. It's quite a system.
Anyway, let's see. One more of those. before we go on?
And just in terms of the question in terms of cash flow. So in 2023, we were 1 million cash flow positive off of 10 programs. So this year we expect to be either break even or use up some of our cash while we're looking for partners. But if we get back to 10 active programs, then yes, we expect to be at this very similar, if not better rate than what we were last year.
Okay. And you've got how many projects that are ready to be partnered?
There are
To
a
the
total
point.
of 6. Yeah.
A total of 6 that are being available with other people. Okay. All right. But right now, your relationship with BHP is probably the most important partnership you got going.
Yeah, well, that one is over 3 programs. So
Okay.
that's definitely an important one. And then we've got JOGMEC as well in that project in Bulgaria, which is the ISCO project. And probably, you know, a really important point to bring up, that is a sediment hosted system. So again, when I talk about global production, that 65 to 70% is based on porphyry systems. About 20 to 25% in addition to that 65 is from sediment hosted systems. So that's really the next largest source of copper for mining. And so obviously you want to focus in on the copper porphyries, but the sediments happen very close to the porphyry systems. And so, you know, focusing on both is definitely still kind of working within that same realm of what the producers are looking for.
Okay. I think we were looking at an Arizona mining company a few years ago, and I think they were doing like pumping some acid down or something, and then getting it at this, like they're injecting acid or something in there to get the copper, and then they would put it into pool. Anyway, I don't know. Does that work?
So that's called in situ leaching.
Okay.
And we as an industry, you know, really would love to see that technology take off. There's one group that's doing it very successfully in Arizona called Taseko Mines. They have the Florence project, which is just northwest of our Picacho project. So in order for that to be successful, you kind of really need the right lithological units to ensure that, you know, you can, your pump rate and your flow rate and certainly your chemical reactions are working well. So it's not it's unfortunately doesn't fit for all deposits, but when it works well, it can be very, very profitable.
Yeah, because it's low cost, right? You're not drilling big open pit mines or anything. You're just doing it. Yeah, it sounded good. And I would guess, and I'm sure the copper price. Let me tell you, I was at a oil and gas conference on the weekend. Was opening speaker, and then the guys that followed me. But I don't know if you're aware, but this situation with the artificial intelligence and how much electricity they need, they're talking about we're going to have to increase our electricity generation by like 30% over just the next 2 years.
Yep.
And there's got to be a massive amount of copper that's going to be involved in that.
Absolutely. You hit it on the nail. That is absolutely one of the important drivers, what we call the electrification of the economy. These server systems not only themselves require important materials in order to build out those drives, or they call them chips, but fundamentally they're giant blocks of drives. As they get put together, transmitting that data and that information and that electricity, copper is a very important part of that process. So yes, I mean, there's actually a really fantastic paper that was just published by the University of Chicago. I think it was Chicago and one of the other universities by Lawrence Chambers, who did a great report on what is exactly copper demand and copper supply. And if we look at current rate versus what we say we need with electrification and EVs and a lot of the other additional requirements, what do we need going forward? And basically, to kind of summarize, and I think he did a great job of that, is he said, we need one new Resolution mine every single year. And Resolution, as you know, is one of the current mines that has been a hot topic in Arizona for production. It's basically about 20 million tons of copper. We need one of those every year. Just for current demand. And then if you look at future demand, we need like 2 to 3 of those because copper demand is supposed to be increasing to 60 million tons per year. So, I mean, the long-term story for copper is that it's real. It's definitely long-term. You don't have to feel like you're risking missing the cycle. You can get in with the right equity, have a very long-term strategy and that is a marketplace that will continue to grow.
Well, I'll tell you, the presentation that was made of how many of these data centers are going to be put just in the state of Virginia, they think it's going to increase natural gas demand by 8 BCF a day, which is like 7 or 8% of our current production over the next couple of years, which is why if you look at a copper price chart and a natural gas price chart, you can see they both have just taken off. Since in the last 4 or 5 weeks, natural gas has gone from below 2 to, I think it's at like 280 today, which is an amazing, I mean, on a percentage basis, it's like a 50 or 60% jump in the price of natural gas just in the last month. And I think copper and gold is going high too. So anyway, okay, Ben asked this question, and I don't really understand this, but sorry I missed it. On the map, can you point out the reservoir mineral discovery locations? He asked that early on, so maybe you did when you got to those maps.
Oh yeah, no, I can pull that back up. That's a very good question. So here I'll go to the kind of the regional map.
Okay.
So here's Timok in eastern Serbia, and Čukaropeki is right here, this red triangle. Can you see my mouse when I move it?
Yes, we can.
Okay. And then as I'll kind of do a little bit of a zoom into that Google Earth image, because that one is fantastic. So here you see the Bore mines. Those are all porphyries that came to surface, right, that we talked about. Cluster of them, like a bunch of my fingers. And then here was a hidden porphyry undercover that was discovered in 2012. These were discovered 100 years ago. This was discovered in 2012. And a massive porphyry system, 1.8 billion tons of 0.86% copper and another 60 million tons of like 2.5% copper. I mean, just a beautiful deposit. So that is right here. And this is all of our ground. Between it, around it, all down the south end of Timok, and then to the north and to the north of the Majdanpek mine, which is one of the key economic drivers of.
So what's the difference? What's the difference? Okay, yours are the black outlines and the orange?
Black and orange are ours, yes.
Okay, and by ours, you have secured the mineral rights, or the,
yes,
the mining rights.
All of those mineral rights, and so they're called licenses in Serbia. So every jurisdiction has a slightly different way of granting mineral rights, but yes, we have those mineral rights. And then the orange ones are optioned out to BHP. The black ones were optioned out to Vale until April of this year, and now we're in discussions with third parties about bringing in a new partner.
Okay, so. But you put up that money. Mundoro puts up that front money to secure the minerals and everything, right?
Absolutely. That's part of our generative portfolio. So for
okay, then when somebody takes the project, do they reimburse you for those upfront costs?
Yeah, it depends on the agreements. Sometimes they can, sometimes other times we want, all of the money to go into aggressive drilling or kind of advancing the projects, but we always get a payment. So, and we've held these licenses pretty much most of them since 2012. The large orange block here, we started accumulating a couple of years ago and have really grown that. And probably to mention here is that Freeport, who was the partner of Reservoir that made the Čukaropeki discovery, that group, Freeport was actually our partner over a part of this license area, this western portion. And Vale was our partner over the eastern portion. And then Freeport, during COVID, dropped their global exploration portfolio. And again, not just Mundoro, everything globally. And Vale, as a result, immediately picked up that package and kind of consolidated all of that with us, meaning under one joint venture partnership. And then now that they have had to drop their global exploration portfolio, we're talking to new third parties about optioning out that ground. So
okay, when somebody comes in and the BHP or somebody takes one of these projects, are you out of it then, or do you run the drill programs?
Well, to date, we have been running all of our exploration programs on behalf of our partners in all of the Serbian projects and in Bulgaria and in Arizona.
So basically, you're just like a contract exploration operator, right? And then when they feel it's time, okay, we're going to go full bore into this thing. We're going to go mine it and bring in engineers and design the mine. Then they take over.
100%. We want to hand over those keys. We do
you
not
don't want to build
mines.
You don't want to build mines.
Exactly. No, we're here at that early stage, you know, and quite frankly, we've seen, you know, because we run so many different programs, our team has seen a lot of information and a lot of data and a lot of core, where oftentimes, you know, we're really starting at a more advanced stage of understanding of the project. So it actually benefits our partners for us to operate them at the onset. And then once they advance beyond a certain stage and, you know, there's a discovery, by all means, we want to hand over the keys and the partners run with it.
Yeah. Then go, baby, go. Drill, baby,
Yeah.
drill, right? Yeah, that's interesting. But the drill programs, when I look at these mining, they're really the exploration. Where in ours, we're drilling to produce oil and gas, but and the drill programs really define the porphyry, right? You define the length and size of the resource, correct?
Yeah,
That's what the drill program does. Okay.
Yeah, you never know if you have 100% of it, but you certainly, you want to drill it out. You want to know its size and scale. And then you obviously want to define better and better as you want to get to closer to the engineering phase. Yeah. So more in a kind of detailed infill drilling.
Yeah. Well, we had just a couple of weeks ago, Amex Exploration, and they said they had over 400 drill holes. And I'm like, well, how many do you have to drill before you actually start mining? I mean, it seems like an incredible amount of drill holes to me in one area. But anyway, okay. The question Cliff asked, he's up in the corner there. You have the TSX symbol. What's the? Oh, I see. Okay, then he answers his own question. So you can buy it in the U.S. with the symbol MUNMF, and I'm going to add this to our watch list, so you will can find it there too. So.
Yeah.
Anyway, and then Matt asked, please provide more explanation on why Vail dropped its partnership with Mundoro and why you are confident that others will step in and take their place.
Sure. Well, like I mentioned, Vale has decided, to drop a lot of their global exploration portfolio. So again, it's not asset specific or Mundoro specific. It's a strategic decision that they made. Obviously, you know, we can't kind of explain why they would do that. What we do know is that they spun out their base metal division. A lot of their mining operations are based on nickel. There was obviously a very significant drop in the nickel price last year, about 43% that it dropped. And so oftentimes, you know, these companies have to make tough choices in terms of where they allocate their capital. And as we all know in the industry, exploration is one of those things that tends to get cut, you know, the first thing that gets cut. So they've dropped a lot of their global exploration. This was one of those portfolios. We're really thankful that everything has been returned to us, 100% ownership. They spent about $13.5 million on these programs, and that is all capital that benefits shareholders. And why do I think we are going to bring in a new partner? Because, like, for example, Dos Cabezos, you have a laramide intrusive right at surface, great geochemistry, never been drill tested, first hole that goes in, and we've clipped the edge of a system. That's what every company is looking for in terms of new opportunities. So, you know, we know what kind of assets the industry needs. And certainly in Serbia, with the number of drill targets and targets that are available for drill testing right away, in a proven mining camp where your cost structure is significantly less than a traditional mining camp in North America or South America, again, very, very attractive land package.
Yeah, and you know, I would tell our listeners too. I say when I was at Hess, John Hess took over when his father died, and he decided to go big time into the Gulf of Mexico. And when we moved to Houston, moved our headquarters to Houston, we sold off. We abandoned like 10 areas and packaged them up and sold everything we had in there. And some of those packages were absolute company makers for other companies. Just because some of these large caps, you know, abandon an area doesn't mean there's anything wrong with it. It's like you said, they are just constantly having to reallocate their capital. And so if they think they found another area of nickel or something that's better, and, you know, they can't do everything, and so they will abandon an area. It doesn't mean there's something wrong with that area. It's just they moved on to something else. Okay, then he said, wait a minute, I think we got that. do you anticipate that Mundoro will stake additional projects in Arizona in 2024?
Yes.
Okay, yes. Is the ultimate goal to become a royalty company or stay a project generator?
Well, certainly as assets advance, and one of the things, we kind of showed in that case study is that if you've got if you've got an asset that is advancing to commercial production, A, it creates a huge amount of capital value in the company, so that market capitalization. But B, what will often happen is if that deposit is extremely valuable, like that one single asset, then most likely you're going to get taken out. And just, 1% of these porphyry, a 1% royalty in a porphyry the size and scale of a BHP or a Jogmec or a Vale or a Freeport, that's worth $500 million. So either somebody's going to take you out, or you're going to create a lot of value in the company and have very significant cash flow just pouring out of the company. So both are, I think, a very realistic outcome on a successful discovery.
Yeah. So, I mean, if somebody really came in, they were really excited about one of your projects, and they said, well, we'll just buy it from you, everything, right? So that could happen.
Yeah,
we'll just
absolutely
take over your position 100%. You're out, and we're just taking it over. But here's a check for 50 million or something.
Oh, well, we wouldn't sell 50 for 50 million.
Yeah. Anyway,
they create a lot more value than that.
Yeah. Okay. Are the Chinese expressing further interest in the Northeast Tedian? I don't know how to pronounce half these. If so, how is the industry viewing their interest?
In terms of the Tethyan Belt, certainly, like I mentioned here, Zhejiang acquired the main assets in Serbia through a privatization process by the government. So they acquired those mines and through a successful tendering process. And then they also acquired Chukotopeki, which, as I mentioned, first Nevsun acquired Reservoir, and then Zhejiang acquired Nevsun. So they obviously have a very important footprint now in Eastern Serbia. And I suspect that they will always be looking for more development stage and, kind of future copper porphyry to get involved with. I don't see that appetite decreasing.
Yeah. I mean, demand for these minerals, I mean, we talked about it on just the electrification of everything. Demand for this stuff's going to be gigantic. I mean, it's just going to be unbelievable. And these big mining companies have got to keep rebuilding their inventory. Just like if you don't keep adding new mines, and it's just like in the oil and gas industries, if you don't keep acquiring new assets to be developed, you're going to just deplete yourself out of business. So you got to keep getting new mines, and especially on these copper's going to an all-time high, gold going to an all-time high. And one thing you haven't really mentioned gold, but you have anything going in the gold area?
Well, we do have this one project location, which is here. It's kind of more in the tertiary portion of the belt. So that's a copper porphyry system, that's a porphyry system that appears to be more gold rich than copper rich. And so that's an opportunity, for example, for a gold focused company rather than a traditional copper focused company. And it was a pretty unique opportunity because, again, it was an intrusive with stockwork veining coming right to surface in a creek, a really good geochemistry around, we certainly could not find any historical drilling on it. And that's the type of thing you pick up and you drill test. So we did the initial groundwork with Kinross there, and we're hopeful that we can bring in a new partner there as well.
Okay, so a lot of your teams, you mentioned 65 people in the field. Do you have 65 people on payroll, or are these just teams you hire? I don't know. They're not actual employees.
We have a pretty big team as a core team. It's probably about 25 to 30 people. That's our core team, and everyone else is contractors. So as you, for example, need to do a geophysical survey, you'll hire a ground magnetic crew to come out and run a ground magnetic program. And so, like I mentioned, during the height of a season when you're doing a lot of field work, you'll have a lot of these crews that are hired essentially to complete work. So it could be geophysical crews, it could be labor for sampling crews, it could be drilling crews for drilling. Obviously, all drilling is done through contractors. So obviously we have our core team that does the geological work, but then we have contractors that do the some of the data collection.
Okay, cool. Here's an interesting political question. If Trump were to win in November, wouldn't the switch back to oil and gas from the green unicorn strategy slow demand up for copper, or would the AI centers survive? My answer to that is I'm on a panel about every 3 or 4 months that's based in Washington, D.C. And I will tell you, the amount of money that now is invested in chasing this AI miracle, whatever it is massive, trillions. And they are fast tracking a couple nuclear power plants. We haven't built a nuclear power plant in decades. There's so much money behind this AI stuff. I don't see any decline in demand for copper.
Yeah,
no.
I agree 100%. Fundamentally, that ship has left the port.
Yeah.
It's fundamentally copper. There is unquestionable demand. I mean, and we're always hearing about new case uses like you just brought up with the data centers for artificial intelligence. Fundamentally, there is absolutely not enough supply in the pipeline to meet that future demand. So there is no way that copper companies are going to just all of a sudden say, okay, and now we're good. No.
Yeah, I know, never. And one guy made a presentation, the guy that was right after me up in Dallas, and he said the thing now that is going through India. In India, the sales of washers and dryers is just exploding because people in India have been washing their clothes down at the river, right? So to have just a washer and dryer is like a major step forward in their standard of living. And they said it's so high that the electricity to run all those washers and dryers is going to be an explosion in the electricity demand in India.
It's a very valid point. I mean, one of the things that a lot of people ask, well, why are you so focused on copper? And we've heard about this copper supply and demand story. How real is it? And one of the things I always like to say is, just imagine you wake up tomorrow and every single copper mine is stopped. Imagine the impact that would have on absolutely everybody. Versus if tomorrow morning you woke up and every gold mining operation stopped.
Yeah.
Not gonna. I mean, it's important.
Your jewelry would become very expensive.
You'd probably make money off of that, but fundamentally, you can't actually live as a society in this day and age without copper.
Yeah, I always say that the population of the Earth is going to 10 billion here this century, and everybody wants a higher standard of living. Now, think about it. What makes your standard of living, and I guarantee it's something that makes your standard of living better. It's stuff that runs on electricity.
Yes.
It's washing machines, dryers, new computers, phones everybody wants, everything, EVs, everything needs copper. Everything that's electrified needs copper. There's no substitute for copper. So
not yet. And I genuinely don't think there will be. I mean, people talk about recycling, but it's really not at that. It's not going to be.
And it's the same way. There's no real substitute for the energy we get from fossil fuels. I'm sorry, but there you can't build enough windmills, and those windmills all need got a lot of copper in them too. So it's crazy. There's one question about geopolitical risk. Are you, in this part of the country, it's on the screen here. Is there any risk to the Ukraine conflict expanding in there or anything?
It's a really good question. And we've given that a lot of consideration, certainly since that conflict started. It's an important regional conflict to resolve, and ideally they should resolve it as quickly as possible. But fundamentally, it is in that region. And we don't see it spilling into the rest of the, we don't see it spilling west of the Ukraine, because if it does, it spills into Europe and into NATO nations. And if it spilled into there, it is, it's a much bigger problem.
Much your bigger deal.
Exactly. So we see that as, as a contained issue, and obviously, hopefully it will be resolved. There's, it's just awful to continue seeing.
Yeah, I know it is. I do believe that if Trump gets elected, he'll resolve that. So it troubles me that we keep pumping money in there, but we don't have any peace talks. Let's get some negotiations growing and try to figure out what can end this. But anyway, are you ever having any permitting problems in Arizona?
We have not had any permitting problems in Arizona. We get asked that question a lot because there's a lot of chatter in kind of media about how long it's taking to permit mines. But generally, like, our rule of thumb is, when you go to a jurisdiction, understand their timelines. Don't come in with your preset expectations of, I want a permit in this amount of time frame. Go talk to the local authorities, figure out what their timeframes are, figure out what their constraints are, and then plan your project schedules around that. And generally, we've had, like I mentioned, we went from staking right into drill permitting and drilling within like a 2-year cycle. That's very good.
Mm-hmm. Well, I tell you, we need to end this, but I'm very encouraged by what I hear. You've got at least one new stockholder today, me.
Fantastic.
Then if you want to come to Houston sometime, I tell you what, see, our group here in Houston, they're people with a lot of industry experience, a lot of geologists, a lot of engineers and stuff. They get this kind of thing. And we're really building up our luncheon program. We're starting to get about 40 people back. Pre-pandemic, we'd have 100 to 120 at some of our luncheons. But, that just killed that whole business. Actually, the place we were having the luncheons went out of business early on in it. So we had to find a new restaurant. But now we're kind of picking it back up. And it sounds like to me that some of the investor relations people, see, we are kind of like, we work with a lot of investor relations type companies that are trying to get more exposure for their public companies, and that's just a way to do it. And you got to get out there and sell the story. It's part of your job. So anyway, Tio, thanks a lot. I really enjoyed this, and hopefully we'll be doing some other stuff with you in the future. But you have anything more for us? Any more comments?
No, I think it's been a really great conversation. So thank you for having us on. I'm actually really excited about coming down to your region. So in person and meeting with geologists and engineers and investors. That's what we love to do, is interact with shareholders and investors. So I'm looking forward to it.
All right. Thanks a lot. So we'll just end it here, and we have taped this. And we will be sending out a link to the replay to our global membership. And we've actually picked up a lot of members in Europe and in Asia just in the last 2 years that are very interested in this sector. All right. Thanks a lot, Jeff. I think it's in control now. So, Jeff, you can end it right there.